Now, we've got an awful lot to get through, so we might not be able to cover everything in detail, but yet another big story this week was the kind of ongoing kerfuffle. I love that word, but kerfuffle. A kind of sort of strange love triangle between Virgin, Qantas and Qatar Airways, and this relates to Qatar being denied access or to increase the number of services they're flying into Australia. Now, Qantas have some, I sound like such an old man, they've got some beef with Qatar, whereas Virgin have less, this is stupid, Virgin have less of a problem with Qatar because they are closer code-share partners. So you've basically got Qantas who it would be in their interest, arguably, to deny Qatar access to Australia because obviously that's increasing their competition.
Would it, though?
We'll get to this in a bit. But obviously Virgin, who have a code-share announcement, a code-share agreement, it's obviously in their interest to have more Qatar flights because that effectively makes Virgin a big international airline again because it opens up so many routes. And, of course, it hurts their biggest rival, Qantas. So there's a very messy relationship. Jake, what is the latest on this?
Yeah, so Alan Joyce and Co were quizzed about this in the Senate estimates hearing as well. Joyce did say, yes, we had made representations to the government on the subject. He did not say whether he had personally spoken to the Prime Minister or the Transport Minister about this. He was saying, I don't go into detail about these private discussions if they did happen. One thing that happened was that Assistant Treasurer Stephen Jones basically came out and said that blocking these extra flights into Australia by Qatar Airways would protect Qantas's sustainability. So what he said was, quote, we can drive prices down, but if we drive them down to a level where it's actually unsustainable to run an airline, instead of having two carriers, we will design our markets in a way which will make it unsustainable for the existing Australian-based carrier. We have a viable airline industry in Australia, and we always want to ensure we're doing things to drive down the cost of airline tickets, but we want to ensure that they do that in a way that doesn't destroy the industry over the medium and long term. And Virgin Australia has come back and said that... This is from Christian Bennett, the Chief Corporate Affairs and Sustainability Officer at Virgin. He says, quote, any suggestion that denying Qatar additional flights was designed to protect Qantas's medium to long-term sustainability neglects the fact that blocking Qatar damages the domestic and international competitive position of Virgin Australia in favour of Qantas. And he went on to say, Virgin Australia delivers great value and great choice to Australian consumers every day. It is the main source of competition to the Qantas Group, and that task is challenging enough without Qantas having public policy designed for its benefit.
You know what I love? I mean this from the bottom of my heart. The thing I love the most about moving to Australia and covering Australian news is that when people are going at each other, they do not care. They are just, and this is a compliment of Australia because Australians speak their mind. There's Absolutely. No nonsense. If this were in the UK...
Well, now, there's plenty of nonsense.
Well, but if this were in the UK, there'd be some very kind of passive-aggressive rubbish statement choosing their words. Whereas here, gloves off, bang,
yes, we
bang.
believe that the minister should reconsider his position and design a policy that allows Froptingtonshire Airways to compete on a level playing field with Capability Foops.
It's not that far off. And I remember when I started covering the news over here, and it was like the first week or two you'd see these, you think this is unusual, and then you realise this actually is a weekly occurrence. Yeah. I prefer this because people are a lot more honest here. Yep. There's no nonsense there. So anyway, that was a little bit of an aside. So they're all going at each other here. Now, to Qantas's, just to take kind of Qantas's side here, to play devil's advocate, the argument is that Qatar may well have all sorts of different businesses, parent companies behind them. They are essentially a state-owned thing. And Qatar, as a state, as a country, however you want to see it, have an almost infinite amount of money. During COVID, when you had Qantas pretty much forced to shut down pretty much all international flying, apart from their kind of recovery sort of missions the government put them on. Qatar was one of the only airlines in the world actually increasing their schedule, and they made a big play about, Qatar can still take you home. And one of the reasons they were able to do that is they have this, I'd say, almost infinite amount of money to be able to see that kind of PR opportunity. So that the argument is, if you let Qatar in, you are actually skewing the market, because they're not able to, they don't have to worry about operating in normal profitable terms of any other airline. So that's why Qantas is saying, well, hang on a minute, if you let them in, then you're skewing the market against us. And that's just not fair. And that will long-term damage Australian airlines, and that will long-term make things worse for Australians, because if you do that and you damage us, and you damage not just us but other competition too, then if they decide to pull out at some point or reduce it, then what's going to be left? That's the argument Qantas would make.
Now, one thing that was put to Alan Joyce and to the other people from Qantas was that that letting Qatar in, and this is something that Virgin says, letting Qatar in, letting Qatar increase frequency would bring airfares down into the Middle East and Europe, because there would be, more competition, more people flying those. What Alan Joyce effectively said was, he was asked, do you think that letting Qatar in would bring airfares down? What he basically said was, these airfares are coming down anyway.
Yes.
Because carriers like Singapore and Emirates and Cathay Pacific, they're all, increasing their capacity. What he also said was, Qatar doesn't have to increase frequency to increase capacity. One thing he asked was, why does Qatar not fly bigger planes into Australia? For example, they've got A380s, he says. Why don't they fly more A380s? He says, why don't they fly more to, destinations outside Sydney, Melbourne, Perth? And, we covered a bit a couple of weeks ago about these so-called ghost flights that Qatar have been operating to places like Adelaide as a final destination, where the suggestion is that they're really doing this to get into Melbourne. But he's saying, if Qatar wants to increase capacity into Australia, there are ways that they can do that without putting on more flights. Or putting on more flights to the majors, which would require sort of a renegotiation of these air rights.
What Qantas are kind of fortunate about is that this kind of kerfuffle has come now, because what we are seeing is a very strong bounce back in international travel, and in fact far quicker than we would have estimated a year ago or even 6 months ago. So we're now seeing a situation where international travel has kind of beaten the domestic bounce back, and that is because we have seen so many carriers allowed back in. So I think that I can see both of the points. I think Virgin are right saying that you would have a reduction in fares if you increased Qatar's flights.
And
but
also
arguably,
it would give Virgin a bit of a leg up.
Wow, this is the thing, isn't it? They don't mention that. But it would be, the argument is that's a short-term thing. Long-term, the argument is that capacity is returning to the market. And for any of you that are trying to book a international flight now, you will see that it is, yes, costing you more than 2019 prices, but it's also now significantly less than it was costing you back in January. And I think we spoke about this on the show a couple of weeks ago. A kind of semi-colleague of ours, Daniel Croft, who sometimes writes for Australian Aviation, he's actually we need to do a proper shout out for him next week. He's in a very cool band in Sydney, and they are touring Germany next month. So a couple of weeks ago, me and him were kind of like looking at flight. We were actually working really hard, if anyone's from the businesses listening.
It's aviation related. It's okay.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Okay.
And we were looking at flights, and we managed to get his whole trip to Germany and back, and all the kind of internal travel around Europe done for just, I think he got it from like $2,300, which pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Pretty good. So the argument is that prices are coming down anyway.
Look, prices are coming down, but I'll say my piece now on this whole thing. This is a really old argument that keeps resurfacing. So Qantas did something similar when Emirates first entered Australia, something similar when Etihad first entered Australia, and doing it again now that Qatar are wanting to expand. The flip side of this coin is a couple of things. Number one, it's in Qantas's benefit if Qatar get more flights, because Qatar is also a One World member airline. So, which means Qantas can put their passengers.
This is a very murky love triangle, yes.
Exactly. It's a really murky love triangle. My argument with Virgin, while it might benefit Virgin, at the end of the day, it's not a Virgin aircraft. It's not Virgin crew. So all Virgin are doing is on-selling their own airfare to another carrier. through a code share agreement. So at the end of the day, passengers not getting on a Virgin Australia aircraft and getting a Virgin Australia service or crew. They're getting a Qatar aircraft and a Qatar crew.
Not that Virgin flies to Europe anyway.
Exactly right. However, Virgin used to have long-haul aircraft.
They did, but the argument was here when they went into administration and they kind of popped out the other end was to effectively end their very long haul international travel. I would argue that yes, you are not getting on a Virgin aircraft, but does the average punter know or care? They go on the Virgin website, they make their booking, and it all seems like a smooth journey. The reason why Virgin want this is they want to be able to say that we are basically still a big international airline in one way or the other.
It benefits them in that way, and look, they do have code share agreements with a lot of other airlines that can still get their passengers to Europe. So this is a really old argument.
And Qantas is, of course, a code share partner with Emirates.
Exactly right. So, if anything, Qatar flying more services into Australia will benefit Qantas even further, because then they've got two of the Middle Eastern carriers tied up really well in a partnership agreement. Qatar through the One World Alliance, Emirates through its code share partnership. So,
well, I'll tell you what. So we've obviously already extended the invite to Alan to do his exit interview. Jane Halicka, if you are listening to this, we'd love to have you on the show too.
At the same time. Why not?
Well,
At
that
the
would be
same
fun,
time.
wouldn't it?
ding, ding, step in the ring.
That would be great.
And get John Sharp in here as well.
Get him in
and
there.
then we just lock the door and leave them for like 45 minutes and see who comes out the other side.
It'll be like Big Brother, but then we could have like a live feed.
3 airlines enter, 1 airline leaves.
Who leaves, you decide.